Hello everyone, welcome back to the Capablanca saga. We are back at round 7 of the 1914 tournament in St. Petersburg. It's Raul Capablanca versus Ossip Bernstein. Now, if you've been following the Capablanca saga from the beginning, you know that it was Ossip Bernstein who first protested against Capablanca, even joining in the 1911 tournament of San Sebastian, and then Capablanca defeated him in a beautiful fashion, and he won the Brilliance prize for that game in the 1911 tournaments of San Sebastian. So here, Bernstein, again with the black pieces, has an opportunity here, but this time he does not face someone who has never proven himself. Here he faces pretty much the favorite to win even the 1914 tournament in St. Petersburg. But okay, as Capablanca said himself, he wasn't feeling all that great, and he had Lasker and Rubinstein as favorites for this tournament. Before I show you the game, one fun story. I was at the hairdresser today, and there were these wallpapers on the wall, on the one half of the wall, and they were articles from the newspapers, and I thought, yeah, okay, they're probably not real articles, they're probably just, imaginary or computer generated or something. But I started reading, and it seemed like a real article, and there were a lot of them. And then I checked the year, and the year was there were some from 1913, and on the other part of the wall were some from 1914. And I thought it'd be super cool if I could see an actual article from the 1914 tournament in St. Petersburg there at the wall of my hairdresser. But unfortunately, that was not the case. As much as I looked, there was no evidence of any chess on the wall. But I did find one very nice article. It was pretty much a clickbait article from 1913 about a Hudson 33 car that you should really get it, and that 2,000 people have already missed on their opportunity to get this car, which is just amazing. So yeah, that's how long ago clickbait was used, but of course even much prior to that. But okay, getting back to this game, Capablanca has the white pieces, and this game, I'm not gonna say anything, but you're gonna enjoy it. Capablanca opens with d4. We have d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and c4 now. We have e6, the queen's gambit declined is on the board, and now knight to c3. Knight b to d7, and here bishop to g5. And here there are a couple of ways you could play this line with black. You generally want to wait till white develops the light square bishop, then you want to capture on c4, push b5, or you could just continue developing, play bishop e7, develop the queen to c7 once the c pawn moves, and then push e5. So those are some general ideas, and here it's very interesting how Bernstein goes about this defense, as he was known to be one of the better defenders of that age. But sorry, not king e7. Bishop to e7. We have e3 by Capablanca, preparing to develop the light square bishop. We have c6 now, and bishop to d3. And here Bernstein now takes the opportunity to force the bishop to lose tempi. We have d captures on c4, bishop captures on c4, and now comes b5. And okay, we already mentioned that you could use this d captures on c4 to make your advancements on the queen side, as the bishop is now somewhat misplaced. This is all very much known. Bishop back to d3, and now a6. We have e4 by Capablanca, preparing e5, of course, and here Bernstein takes a very interesting approach. He plays e5. He doesn't want to allow Capablanca to push e5 himself. The better idea here would have been c5 to tackle the center from the queen side. Here he plays e5, a temporary pawn sacrifice. Capablanca accepts it, d captures on e5, and now comes knight to g4, offering some trades, which is something you usually want to do in this system of the Queen's Gambit declined. Bishop to f4. Capablanca does not trade here, as he now wants to keep his pawn on e5, and he asks Bernstein, what's your plan here? We have bishop to c5 now, pressuring the f2 pawn. Capablanca castles, so there's no more threat of capturing on f2, and here queen to c7. And it seems that Bernstein figured everything out. Both of the knights are attacking the e5 pawn, also the queen is pressuring the e5 pawn. Bernstein got some nice development for the temporary price of one pawn, and well, Capablanca's pawn structure in the center is somewhat messed up. So there is compensation here, but he forgot one very important thing, and that's I'm Captain Jack Sparrow. I'm just kidding, of course. He forgot that Capablanca is a brilliant player, and here Capablanca plays rook to c1. And now there are problems here. What's the problem? If you decide to capture the pawn now, for example, knight d captures on e5, then you get knight captures on e5, knight captures, and now you get queen to h5. And here's somewhat of a problem. You cannot play f6 to defend the knight because the pawn is pinned. If you try to kick the queen away with g6, you lose the knight here. So here black would have to go bishop to d4, but now you finally see the idea behind the rook to c1. Now knight to d5 is an option because, of course, the pawn cannot capture. The queen on c7 would be lost. Queen to d6, still defending this knight, and now finally rook captures on c6. This is where the magic happens. Queen captures on c6, and only now bishop captures on e5, threatening to win another piece, but also going after the g7 pawn. Bishop captures, queen captures with check. Now you cannot go king to f8 or something like that, because you get queen e7 check, and then it's just checkmate here. Queen captures on e8 would be checkmate. So after this queen captures on e5, you would have to block bishop to e6, and now queen captures on g7 will just be deadly for white. For example, rook to f8, you don't want to lose your rook. Knight to f6 check, king to e7, and now comes e5. And here it seems like black is possibly defending because he's up material, but not really. After the rook is moved, rook to e4, bishop to e4 is the threat for this very nice attack. But then after the rook moves, you would get queen to g5. This very nice move, threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. The knight is controlling d squares, so the king has nowhere to move. The pawn is controlling d6, and here it would just be a slow, suffocating death for black. So after this rook to c1 move, a brilliant move by Capablanca, he tackled this early e5 idea by Bernstein over the board, so to say. Here we have f6. Bernstein decides to go about this this way. As the bishop on f4 is unguarded, so Capablanca cannot capture on f6 due to queen captures on f4, but Capablanca plays a different idea. We have bishop to g3, and now finally we have f captures on e4. On e5. And here it seems, okay, Bernstein now has some excellent development. This knight is ready to come all the way to f6. The king will castle. The bishop can then be developed. And Bernstein is no longer down a pawn. So it seems everything is all right, but not really. Here Capablanca finds, once again, just a brilliant move. I could ask you to find it, but I will first show you the brilliant move, and I will only then ask you to continue Capablanca's brilliancy. Here Capablanca played b4, and now you see the real power of the rook to c1 move. Capablanca figured everything out. This was the real plan, and now what happens here? If bishop captures on b4, which is Capablanca's plan, then comes knight d5 once again. And after the queen has to defend the bishop on b4, queen d6, now comes knight captures on b4, queen captures, and now rook captures on c6. And here white would just be too strong here. Rook to c7 will be a suffocating move for black. If you develop, then rook to c7 attacks the bishop, forces the king to yet stay longer without castling, as the knight would also be attacked. And if you don't do this, if you just castle, still rook to c7, such a powerful move. White is just so much better here. So after this b4 move, Bernstein does not capture it. He goes bishop to a7. But this is the position Capablanca actually wanted. So first Bernstein doesn't go for this first trap, doesn't go for the second trap. But now feel free to pause the video here and try to find Capablanca's real idea in this position here. I'll give you a couple of seconds, as it's really just a beautiful idea. Everything started with the move rook to c1. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an amazing player, just creating brilliancies wherever you go. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here not knight d5, but rather bishop captures on b5. Just forcing black to deal with the loss of material. And here there are a couple of ways you could go about this. One way is to just capture the bishop, but there aren't really all that many ideas here. There are some ideas with knight to e3, forcing white to first capture the knight, but it all leads to severe material loss for black. So here Bernstein accepted the bishop, a captures, and now comes knight captures on b5. So yes, bishop sacrifice, but you grab two very important pawns on the queen side. But also black has to react. You cannot capture, the pawn is still pinned, the queen is under attack. We have queen to d8, and now comes knight to d6 check. And this is a very important move, because once again we have to go to the famous book about this tournament, written by Siegbert Tarrasch. Tarrasch wrote here that knight to d6 is a very strong move, but that rook captures on c6 would have given a victory sooner. But there's the problem, and it's very interesting. Now it's easy. I'm making this video in 2019 to say how Tarrasch is wrong about this, as we have all the engines in the world that just give us answers straight away. But it's interesting that as Tarrasch was writing a book after the tournament, of course, he analyzed the positions over the board, and it's interesting that Capablanca chose the exact strongest variation over the board, and Tarrasch, when analyzing the position, later at home to prepare some lines for his book, found a lesser line. And it's very interesting. This rook captures on c6 move, this is the variation Lasker gives in his book, that now after black castles, we have queen to d5 check, getting the queen in line with the rook that is undefended on a8, and after king to h8, now pawn to h3, wins material, because after the knight moves, rook captures knight, knight captures, and now white just picks up the rook that is undefended on a8. But the problem with Tarrasch's idea is that after king to h8 and h3, black does not have to go back with knight to f6. Black can actually play knight captures on f2, and now Tarrasch would actually be able to really complicate life for Capablanca, because after bishop captures, you would get bishop captures with check, rook captures, and now bishop to b7, attacking the rook here. So knight to d6, now comes bishop captures rook, queen captures on c6, and now the idea that most likely was overlooked by Tarrasch when doing the book, I think he most likely has gotten this far, is actually queen to b6, giving up the knight on d7. And after queen captures, now comes rook captures on a2, threatening queen captures and checkmate on g2. So after knight to f7 check, king to g8, now knight to h6 check, with the idea that if the knight is captured, queen d5 check will pick up the rook on a2, then the king has to go back, king h8, and now finally knight to g4, white would be able to defend the rook, but now comes h5, the knight is under attack, queen to e7 now, queen to e7 now, going after the rook on f8, king to g8, and now comes queen captures on e5. There's nothing to do with the knight, you cannot protect it, you cannot move it. Queen captures, and now h captures on g4. And here white would actually have nothing better than go for a perpetual with queen to d5 check, king to h8, not queen d5 check, but rather, not queen queen d5 check, king moves, and now queen to h5 check, we would get this perpetual. So in fact, the move Capablanca played, knight to d6 check, is the strongest and the only correct way to go for a victory here. The move Tarrasch chose is not working due to the fact that after h3, knight doesn't have to go back, simply knight capture. It's a very complicated line, but it's just amazing that Capablanca found knight d6 to be the strongest over the board. Or maybe he was just lazy to calculate rook captures on c6. It's, we'll never know. Okay, king to f8. And now comes rook captures on c6. Now knight captures on f2 is pointless, because white can simply ignore you. The knight from d6 also covers f7, queen b3 comes with the threat of checkmate. And now after black protects against checkmate, as there are no useful discoveries for black to be made here, bishop captures and grab that knight. Nothing good is happening here for black. But okay, after rook to c6, knight to b6 now. Further protection of the bishop on c8 is needed. And now comes bishop to h4, attacking Bernstein's queen, queen to d7, and now finally Capablanca goes for the easiest idea. Knight captures on c8. And here, if you play something like queen captures on d1, you get this line. Rook captures on d1, now comes rook captures on c8, rook captures with check, knight captures, and now the problem for black, rook to d8 check. King has to move, and now you pick up the rook here. After the knight moves, as the knight is under attack, now you play h3, and now the e5 pawn falls as well. Knight f6, knight captures, and black is just falling apart. And also white is up, plenty in material. So after knight to c8, we have queen captures on c6. Bernstein grabs the rook, but now we have queen to d8 check, and this is what Bernstein had to allow to avoid that losing endgame. Queen to d8 check, we have queen to e8 blocking, and here again a very nice move. Although instead of this queen to d8 check, Capablanca again had a different line. A line he could have gone for, a much quicker line, but again it's probably, Capablanca finds a line that wins, and he doesn't look for faster lines, as he does have to reach time control. But you're enjoying yourself in your home, feel free to pause the video here and try to find the quicker line Capablanca could have played. Once again, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on creating these brilliancies wherever you go. Bishop to e7 check is much quicker, because now, okay, if you go to the back rank, then comes queen to d8, but then you have to go to king to f7, so now knight g5 check. King to g6, and now finally, as the knight opened the path here, queen captures on g4. Queen captures on c8, now offering to trade queens, but now knight to e6 check. King to f7, queen captures on g7, king captures on e6, and now rook to d1 prepares checkmate, and there's no good defense against this. Black would have to start giving material, but then pawn captures, king has to move, and then queen f6 check, king e4, and queen to f3 will be checkmate, but any other line leads to checkmate just as well. So this is one very nice line, but Capablanca finds a different one. Not bishop to e7 first, but rather queen to d8 check. And okay, we have queen to e8 blocking, and now bishop to e7 check. King to f7, and now knight to d6 check, attacking the queen and the king, so a very nice fork, but also Capablanca's queen is under attack. But this is what Capablanca finds. King to g6, now comes knight to h4 check. King to h5, knight to e8, grabbing the queen now, rook captures queen, so Bernstein also grabs Capablanca's queen, and now knight captures on g7 with check. King to h6, and now knight g to f5 with check. The king has very few squares, h5 the only available square now, king to h5, and now h3. And now you can see that there's nowhere to play the knight. If you go f6, the bishop will capture it. If you go to h6, then you have taken away the h6 square from your king. Then knight to g3 or knight to g7 will be checkmate. The king has nowhere to go. Very nice. So after h3, we have knight to c8. Bernstein has to try something. H captures on g4 with check, king captures, and now bishop captures on d8 finally. Rook captures on d8, and now comes g3. And this is the position most likely Capablanca saw when he decided to play that queen to d8 check. If there was nothing better, he most likely would have looked for bishop to e7 check, but there was no need, as here Capablanca has a winning endgame. He's up 3 pawns, and the opponent's king is just in a terrible position, waiting to be just dominated. Rook to d2 was played by Bernstein, going after the a2 pawn. We have king to g2. And now not capturing immediately, because white would just continue knight f3, knight captures on e5. First, rook to e2, going after the e4 pawn. But Capablanca doesn't mind with a4, and now comes knight to b6. Black wants to activate, knight to e3, king to h5, and now comes a5, attacking the knight. Knight to d7, and now knight h to f5. We have knight to f6. There's not much black can do here. Black is just trying something, but b5, b6 is coming. So we have b5, now preparing b6, so bishop to d4, you don't want to allow your bishop to remain there. We have king to f3, Capablanca even decides to defend the e4 pawn. We have rook to a2, now comes a5, protecting the a5 pawn. Bishop to a7, now, okay, the bishop is now controlling the pawns on the light squares. Now rook to c1, now the rook is coming into the game. We have rook to b2, and now g4 with check. King to g5, and now rook to c7, attacking the bishop. We have rook, and sorry, yeah, I mean, here Bernstein can just resign. There's really no good move here. But instead of resigning, Bernstein decided to play a few more moves here, perhaps just so it seems that Capablanca took longer to take him down. He played rook captures on f2 for some reason, king captures, and now knight captures on g4. Okay, it's a little nifty line. The knight is pinned. Okay, you cannot capture. But after Capablanca played king to f3, it was in this position that Ossip Bernstein resigned the game, and Capablanca won this brilliant game. So not only did he beat Bernstein in the 1911 San Sebastian tournament and proved to him and everyone by winning that game against him and the entire tournament that he definitely deserves to be there, but now also in round 7 of the 1914 St Petersburg Tournament, he creates this brilliancy against the same opponent who protested against him 3 years ago, showing him who's the boss, yeah? And not only that, before this game was played, 2 games prior to that, Tarrasch was supposed to get a brilliancy prize for his game against Nimzowitsch, and people were, tournament organizers were considering that game for the brilliancy prize. But when they saw this game Capablanca played, the brilliancy prize in this tournament was awarded to Capablanca for his game against Ossip Bernstein here. And it's just brilliant how this entire game from the opening, from this bishop e7 move, Bernstein just, mixes up lines, goes b5 and e5 in the same line, which is not something you can do, and Capablanca takes advantage of it just brilliantly. And it's a position that's, this line is played even today, so you should remember it. If someone goes this temporary pawn sacrifice against you, it's very unlikely, but, just so you know, rook to c1 here, just deadly, winning. There's no way for black to escape all the threats after. This rook to c1 is actually the real brilliancy in this game. But everything else that follows is, just as well. But okay, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I would like to thank David Kaisa, Rafael Solarz, Paul Staples, Mark Gamble, and Andrew Granato for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the Capablanca saga, checking up on Lila, the match against Stockfish is almost over, and, of course, checking on your hashtag suggestions. Thank you all, and have an excellent rest of your day, and see you soon.